Good morning, everyone. Everyone hear me okay and see me okay? Get a thumbs up from someone. Thank you, Adil. It has an interesting, live streaming has an interesting parallel with life, or you could say our spiritual life. We need good friends. It's not easy to see oneself, not clearly. And there's definitely a role there for teachers and good friends to help us see ourselves clearly. So good morning or good evening, depending on where you are, on what side of this sphere we call Earth. Let's see. Good grouping of people here already. So yesterday we had this wonderful rain, and I've been enjoying very much spring and the bird life here. And amidst all the things that one could be troubled about in the world, I encourage, and I do so myself, take time to attend to nature, listen to nature. I find it very normalizing, grounding, and delightful. And I don't know why, in particular, yesterday, just spending time all through the day, taking breaks to look out the window or actually go outside. We had this mix of rain and clouds and little bits of sun here and there. And in particular, I was listening to the rain, watching the rain, and watching our birds. In particular, this pair of robins that we have here that are nesting right outside of my hut. And just in the last week, these little baby robins have gone from something that looked almost indistinguishable as a bird to something that looks very much like a bird. And the 4 chicks have the most diligent parents. They are working all day, protecting the nest, and in a very beautiful, cooperative way, flying around and gathering worms and grubs and things to feed these guys. They have 4 open mouths in there that need feeding. And I took two little periods of time to watch them and do a little recording, which I need to cut together for a little to make it worth sharing. So I thought I could share a clip this morning. Got some very nice shots of them caring for their chicks. So we'll give Ginnery a little break once that's ready. So he is still very much here and part of the Pacific Hermitage. So let's see. We got just about everybody who wants to be here is here. Or everybody who can be here is here. A couple little bits of news. One, I got an email from Tisarana Monastery, and if you're a fan of Lumpur Viradamo and his Dhamma talks, and everyone should be a fan of Lumpur Viradamo and his Dhamma talks, they always sound like this loving friend or a warm, caring, fatherly figure is talking to you. I love his Dhamma talks. He's going to be doing some live streaming. I'm not sure. Some of his students in Singapore, Malaysia, organized a Zoom event for him. So if you're not on the Tisarana mailing list, you might contact them to get the details. If you're part of the Portland Friends of the Dhamma, I posted it in the group. So the Zoom details are there in the group. please don't contact me. I can't be emailing all that stuff around. So contact Lumpur Dhammo or contact his monastery if you're interested in tuning into that. And that is on May the 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So for those of us living out here on the West Coast, 4 p.m. And that would be, today is Tuesday, May 19th. So just a couple days from now. So might put that on your calendar. Also, I've got some comments from people who enjoy listening rather than watching the video, or they can't watch the video. So at some point I might explore breaking out some shorter form bits of the reflections and questions and answers, and maybe if I can set up a nice workflow, even offering something as a daily audio version of this. So, and one thing I might ask of you all, if you want to contribute to that, is just to, if there's something in particular, a story or a reading or a reflection that you find particularly useful, you can either in the chat just note the time or email hermitage@abhayagiri.org. I can't know what's of the greatest use to people. I can just try to be myself and share my experience. So yes, should point out various clips or time codes that people enjoy. And also it's a nice feedback thing. This whole thing is a grand experiment for me. And there's all kinds of feedback that I could use to make it a more useful time for everyone here. So yesterday we got a little, we had a wonderful impromptu focus on questions that people were offering here in the chat, and that's quite nice to have, and I like how it flowed. And I do want to keep somewhat of a focus on reflecting on the teachings we've just been through on the Satipatthana retreat. In particular, keep our eye on working with the mind, noticing hindrances, creating our own language for them. I even had a really fun idea a few mornings ago when I was meditating, like naming them, coming up with names, almost like the 7 dwarfs or something. It's like 5 names for the hindrances: greedy, Angus, and I don't know, I can't. Some of the thoughts that come to one in the midst of meditation are hard to remember, but it started to get a little bit too discursive, but coming up with 5 fun names, because we want to know them just the way that we know characters and people that are there in our life. We want to know the feeling tone of them, how they affect us in mind and body, and be sensitive to them, but also having our own translation, our own language. A shared language is useful. And being able to name something, of course, is an important part of mindfulness and consciousness. So, anyways, I was thinking it'd be a fun project to come up with 5 names for the hindrances, and then 7 or 5 for their opposite. So, yes, here we go. Grumpy and dopey. Yeah, well, grumpy and dopey. I quite like greedy. I actually had a friend when I was in college whose dog was named Greedy. I think that works as a name. And then for anger, I came up with Angus. So dopey would work for the 3rd hindrance quite well. And then coming up with names for the 7 factors of awakening. And quite a few days ago, I made the suggestion and gave a little homework assignment for people to just search for the hindrances on Sutta Central. And one of the benefits of looking at especially some of the shorter suttas, is there's many, many suttas that underscore one of the chief messages Ajahn Sudanto was trying to drive home in talking about Dhamma categories in specific, but also it's there more in his emphasis on how to develop and use the Satipatthana. And you find this over and over in many suttas dealing with the hindrances. They mention the hindrances and resolving those, and then cultivating the 7 factors of awakening. So, like, those are 2 nice little sets to help flesh out and put some meat on our kind of more fundamental piece of developing the mind, which is putting forth right effort. So, how to put forth right effort? In the way it's described, it's very global and basic, and then this is a way to add detail to that. So, and a day or so ago, Bodhipala, Upasaka Bodhipala, who I believe is one of the stewards at Birkin, if I remember right, shared a sutta with me that follows on nicely from the conversation we were having yesterday. Some of the questions led us into a little bit of an exploration of techniques for removing hindrances or overcoming unskillful states of mind. And we talked about this very important and useful sutta, the removal of distracting thoughts, and having a set of strategies, a tiered set of strategies even, on how to engage with the mind when we find it in the grips of hindrances or unskillful states of mind. We're not merely to notice them. We're not merely encouraged to just abide with them. That's not what patient endurance is all about. That's certainly not what right effort is about. You want to overcome them, resolve them. And this sutta that Bodhipala shared with me has a very similar analogy to the second of those strategies, which I thought we'd kind of go through because I like these nice short suttas for sharing something like this. So, yeah, Sher's just popped this in here. Whoops, move this up. The removal of distracting thoughts, Majjhima 20. So, if you haven't yet read it, it's worth reading. So, but so I thought maybe what I'd do this morning as a way of reflection is to read this sutta that Bodhipala sent me, and we can talk about that or contemplate that a little bit, because it follows on nicely from what we were talking about yesterday. So let's see, let me get into screen sharing mode here if I can. So the name of this sutta, it comes from the Numbered Sayings, the Anguttara Nikaya Book of the Tens, and your own mind. So at one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in the Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants. Venerable sir, they replied, and the Buddha said this. Mendicants, if a mendicant isn't skilled in the ways of another's mind, then they should train themselves. I will be skilled in the ways of my own mind. And how is a mendicant skilled in the ways of their own mind? Suppose there was a young man or woman, youthful and fond of adornments, and they check their own reflection in a clean, bright mirror or a clear bowl of water. If they see any dirt or blemish there, they try to remove it. But if they don't see any dirt or blemish there, they're happy with that. as they've got all that they've wished for. How fortunate that I'm clean. In the same way, checking is very helpful for a mendicant's skillful qualities. Am I often covetous or not? So, first hindrance. Am I malicious or not? Reference to the second hindrance. Am I often overcome with dullness and drowsiness or not? Third hindrance. Am I often restless or not? Am I often doubtful or not? Am I often irritable or not? Am I often corrupted in mind or not? Am I often disturbed in body or not? Am I often energetic or not? And most importantly, am I often immersed in samadhi or not? So this is just as a commentary, this is a interesting feature that we find in some of the suttas where, especially in the in Guttara, where the Buddha takes some sort of set of dhammas and then unpacks it a little bit more and adds some extra kind of qualities into a reflection there. Suppose upon checking, a mendicant knows this: I am often covetous, malicious, overcome with dullness and drowsiness, restless, doubtful, irritable, defiled in mind, disturbed in body, lazy, and not immersed in samadhi. In order to give up those bad, unskillful qualities, they should apply outstanding enthusiasm, effort, zeal, vigor, perseverance, mindfulness, and situational awareness. Suppose your clothes or head were on fire. In order to extinguish it, you would apply outstanding enthusiasm, effort, zeal, vigor, perseverance, mindfulness, and situational awareness. In the same way, in order to give up these bad, unskillful qualities, that mendicant should apply outstanding enthusiasm. But suppose that upon checking, a mendicant knows this: I am often content, kind-hearted, free of dullness and drowsiness, calm, confident, loving, pure in mind, undisturbed in body, energetic, immersed in samadhi. Grounded on those skillful qualities, they should practice meditation further to the end of defilements. So, nice little short sutta there. A few things to note, just reflecting on it. So that second means of removal of distracting thought that we were talking about yesterday, which I forget how it is that I referred to it, but the first one is you merely replace an unskillful thought with a skillful thought. And that is our top tier strategy. And if you actually look at the language of the removal of distracting thought, this notion of it being progressive in nature and application is embedded right in there. And I have it here. I can't remember what the exact language is. Let me see. If while he is examining the danger in those thoughts, there still arise. So you move from means to means. And it's like if the first means doesn't do the trick, then you move to the next strategy that we were talking about before. And here I've highlighted on the page this second strategy. It's worded a little bit differently than in the sutta I just read, but just as a man or woman, young, youthful, and fond of ornaments, would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake or a dog or a human being were hung around his neck. So they use quite a graphic image in this one. But the image that's used in both these teachings is interesting because it's pointing to caring for one's appearance. So in this Sutta, Your Mind, it's like one cares if one's mind is pure or not, are sullied in some way, are defiled in some way. In this second, in the other sutta, removal of distracting thoughts, it seems a little more connected even with the notion of vanity. And in conversation, sometimes people think, well, aren't we not supposed to care about the self and the whole notion of caring about our appearance or something? If everything's not self, how are we supposed to practice for the purification of mind, constellating the self in some sort of care about how it is that I appear or something in the world? But there's some faulty thinking there. You can't merely just out of faith or an act of will or something stop this kind of process of selfing. And this is a gradual path. This is a gradual process of developing the mind and purifying the mind. And there is a role for engendering a kind of care about that is akin and maybe even correctly sort of identified as a form of wholesome selfing, if you will. As you're kind of progressing on the path, you should care about the notion of living up to speaking and thinking and acting in a way that is beyond reproach or remorse, and something you can be, in a sense, proud of. There's a wholesome sense of pride, and there's also a wholesome sense of shame that are talked about in the suttas. And these can be very important reinforcing cares that one has to support their practice. And in this sutta on your own mind, caring for your mind and developing your own mind, like you should care that these defilements are present in the mind and be devoted to putting forth effort to resolve them and further the process of purification. So yeah, I notice Adil has called out hiri and ottappa, those qualities of mind in particular. So translated in different ways, but one of the components of hiri and ottappa is a sensible fear of doing something unskillful, as well as a wholesome sense of shame. That sort of feeling like you wouldn't want your teacher or some person that you respect highly to know that you're thinking this, saying this, doing this. So, and that's an important part of the motivational structure that the Buddha talks about developing as a practitioner. So, and this is the second strategy, which is interesting. So, we might be more prone to, we talked about wise reflection and kind of analyzing sort of how it is that certain defilements arise, or even a progressive approach in attention. But first is like, see if you can just change the mind. And notice, like later in the sutta, and I'll scroll down here, look at this language. This flies in the face of the notions that we should just merely be aware of defilements and tolerate them. And the suttas are full of this kind of language. The Buddha says you shouldn't tolerate these things. Sometimes you can't overcome them, and maybe patient forbearance is the best that you can do. But the general overarching advice is we should be engaged in resolving unskillful states, abandoning skillful states, replacing unskillful states with skillful ones as much as possible, and care for ourselves, our body and mind, so that we have the energy, the faith, the energy, the zeal to engage in that. And this image of the immediacy of it, like suppose your clothes are head or on fire. That's how quickly one should respond to the awareness that unskillful states of mind, hindrances in particular, should be sort of dealt with. So, and brought to resolve. And this is a huge part of training the mind. There's a role for patience, but you don't want to be overly patient. I mean, and this might be even more important and more true, like when we're in a period of conscious cultivation, like say a retreat period or something like that. But just in general, I mean, we're kind of trying to sort of improve the environment of our mind and our consciousness, and we're in some sort of sense trying to retrain ourselves. And there's great cumulative benefits and effort to just step by step, moment by moment, sort of developing the habits to resolve unskillful states of mind as quickly as one can and replace them with something better. And if you can't merely just change your mind and switch from a hindrance or an unskillful state of mind to a skillful one, then the second thing is caring for how it looks or appears in the mind. So, like, let's apply this to a state of anger. Like, it's easy, and I've done a lot of contemplation around this to just sensitize myself to how anger is a great stain or a toxin on the mind. And so, when anger is there, especially, say, in a form of mild irritation or something like this, it can be a little difficult to develop the resolve to figure out how to resolve that and change the mind and shift the mind into a more skillful sort of state of mind. And this second strategy sometimes is very useful if you just think of it as a stain or a blemish, something that just needs to be removed or clean, and just as anything that you care for, like your home or your appearance or your clothes or your car or your house. If you see that it's stained in some way, then there should be this natural desire to want to clean it up, and clean it up immediately is what the Buddha is saying here. I was going to wait to visit this sutta when maybe we got around to talking a bit more about the third of the Satipatthanas, because it has a nice correlation with that. There's that binary mindfulness practice that we talked about. Are these states present or not? And the benefit of training oneself to think in that way is you will increase the opportunity to sort of discover these states when they're there, but also when they're absent. And that can be a cause for great joy, especially for the states that we have a more habitual difficulty with. So if you're identified as having an anger problem, it's a great relief to sort of reflect that anger is not present in one. You have a time, a problem sort of getting all cranked about some particular issue or something, it's good to notice that you feel rather equanimous about it. So there's somebody that you feel negative about and they come to mind. It can be nice to feel that you can harbor a bit of goodwill instead of ill will towards them, and then delight in that. And then that further strengthens this whole process of purifying the mind and withdrawing the nutriment for the defilements. And that gets us to a state where it is easier to access these positive qualities of mind that are mentioned in here, and also the 7 factors of awakening. So, practice like your hair's on fire. That is the message. That is the message. Practice like your hair's on fire. Okay, well, we're out of time, just like that. So quickly, a half hour goes. So I will see you all tomorrow morning, friends. Thank you for joining me, all 92 of you. And have a lovely day. See you again tomorrow. I want to be spiritually attractive.